Today, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about chronic fatigue, long COVID, and other complex chronic illnesses. Y'all know that I get really careful on this podcast when discussing alternative medicine, and that's because there's so much misinformation out there, so many practitioners making claims without any kind of evidence whatsoever, supplement companies that are really just trying to make a quick buck. And we need to be really careful with stuff like that. So I'm always looking for approaches that blend the best of conventional and alternative medicine with practitioners who are both compassionate and scientifically grounded. So today, my guest is Dr. Jenny Tufenkian, a naturopathic physician with over 20 years of experience who brings something really special to this discussion. She's not only treated thousands of patients with these conditions, but she's also walked this path herself. It sounds a lot like my own path and my own journey, so I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about that with you. And she's overcome debilitating fatigue twice in her life. So in this episode, she'll share her framework of the 5 root causes behind chronic fatigue and why most practitioners only address 1 or 2 of them. And whether you're personally dealing with unexplained fatigue, supporting someone who is, or just really interested in understanding these complex conditions better, I think you're really going to like this episode. And stay tuned until the end of the episode. Dr. Jenny's going to share about her upcoming Summit on Chronic Fatigue, which is April 11th through 18th. It's free to attend, and then you can purchase replays after if you can't make the whole thing. And she is bringing together the top researchers and healers in this field. So I think many of you will want to check it out. The Chronic Illness Therapist podcast is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe, while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learned here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. This podcast is meant for educational purposes only. For specific questions related to your unique circumstances, please contact a licensed medical professional in your state of residence. Thank you so much, Dr. Jenny, for being here. I would love for you to share a little bit about your practice and where you work and what you've been working on as of recent.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Destiny. It's been great. It's just great to be here. So I am a naturopathic physician. I'm licensed primary care doctor in multiple states in the United States, and I see people all around the world right now, mostly through telemedicine, and really guiding them through this journey of dealing with complex chronic illness. And I think, you and I both know, and everyone listening really knows too, it's not a one size fits all situation. And so I'm all about helping people uncover what are their root causes and what are the health foundations they need to focus on. What's their individual, what was their individual setup so we can get them, back onto that road of recovery, really starting to feel better. And I'm all about people being empowered in their own healthcare. So I work in Portland, Oregon, but like I said, because of this amazing technology that we're meeting here, we can now work all around the world, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. It is really complex. And so people have been through in my audience have been through all types of care from, Western meds have Western medications and doctors have failed me to even like the rabbit hole of functional medicine, naturopathic medicine. And it can feel like that, a rabbit hole. And then from my own personal experience, you can sometimes then you come up for air and you're like, oh, it all actually makes sense. What I was just doing for the last 5 years that felt like
Yes.
a rabbit hole. So both experiences can be true. How long do you typically work with? I mean, I'm trying to ask in a way that gives a clear answer, but I know you work with many different illnesses and many different types of people, but I'm like, what is your kind of beginning thing that you do with people that helps you start to get down the right, like, okay, this is what we're looking at?
Yeah, so it really depends on what their previous journey has been, and that depends. And I'll kind of share a couple different patient experiences so you kind of have an idea. Again, I'm about highly individualizing the process for the person that I'm talking to, because I think that that's what needs to happen. So for some people, they've been on this wellness journey for a really long time, And for some of them, they have gotten answers along the way and things have worked. And so they've already worked on lots of stuff and they come to me because, I work with people with these complex cases that have often been to the 15 doctors for 20 years and have the huge stacks of chart notes. And they come to me. And honestly, a lot of the other work has already been done, because they were good doctors. They did a good job. They did workups. They had great protocols and they've already they do know what they should be eating and they do know how to kind of they have gotten some of their other infections down or something, and something was missed. I pick up something that was missed. And so we get to work on that. So an example would be a patient that came to me who was a yoga instructor and she'd been on this journey for about 10 years. She came to me and I listened to her, I took her history, and there are certain ways that she was describing her fatigue that let me know that this was most likely a reactivated viral infection. There's kind of I'm walking through molasses feeling. I have cement in my legs. There's we talk about, I talk about my patients can talk about tired like wine sommeliers talk about wine. And, and it's like one of my patients said, yeah, I'm a sommelier of tired when I told her that. So, there's different kinds of tired and I'm listening for that. What are they saying? When does it show up? What is it always there or does it come and go throughout the day? These are cues to me as to what root cause might be happening and which health foundations they need to address first, second, and third. Again, this person came in, her diet was amazing. Her sleep was incredible. She had all this stuff dialed in, like just, picture perfect lifestyle. Mindset was good. She's not stuck in her limbic brain. She was doing great. Like I could tell all this. And yet she's like, I'm still tired. I'm like, gotcha, girl. Honestly, it was super fast. It was, we put her on an antiviral protocol, a 3-legged stool approach I do. And she was way better in 2 weeks and substantially better in 6 months. Like, she didn't need to take the protocol anymore in 6 months. That's unusual because she had already done all the stuff before and that was fast, just being honest. For her to be 2 weeks in, like, thank you, doctor. Like, I feel great. I'm like, you're welcome. But I also feel like the credit goes to all the work you've been doing and all these other people too. I had the easy job of the last person here, right? Compared to somebody who has been 15, 20 years doing this and has been hitting brick walls every place and has not really gotten the right kind of answers for them. We're starting at a different place as we are with the person who is new to this. I mean, I'm seeing these kids who are 18, 19, young adults, 23, 24, 25, who have gotten hit by COVID. And it's activated some probably genetic stuff that was in their body anyway. So they're now triggered with some autoimmune conditions. And all of a sudden they were active, intelligent kids who are now like on the couch back at mom and dad's. And their case is a little bit different because we need to kind of, start from the beginning. They haven't had any treatments yet. The more complex patients, and I would say it's the same no matter what. I'm really listening for those. I'm so listening for 5 root causes, and I'm trying to rule those in or rule those out in my head as I'm listening to that first history and as I'm taking the intake notes. And then I'm looking at labs they've already done to confirm, to rule in or rule out what I'm thinking, and then I'm ordering other tests if I feel like I need them, or we're doing trials because sometimes a lot of the stuff you can't even test or the test isn't reliable. And so I'm only testing the things that make a difference. They're going to make a difference for us clinically. And then sometimes we're just doing, like I said, a treatment as a trial, and that lets us know how the body responds. So
yeah, even the way you're explaining it now, I feel like is so much more clear than a lot of people that I've talked to. So yeah, and I've talked to a lot. Tell me, there was 2 things I want to ask you about: the 3-legged approach and then the 5 root causes that you tend to be looking at.
Sure, absolutely. So the 5 root causes that I'm looking at for people who are struggling with long COVID, chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis, or really any of the other complex kind of mystery illnesses, things that don't fit into neat, tidy boxes, because frankly, there's massive overlay with all of these, including the autoimmune types of, stuff. So, I'm looking at the first is what I call the gateway root cause, which is that hormone triangle. So I'm looking at that adrenal hypothalamic pituitary axis, your stress response. Are you stuck in a hyper response, or are you flatlining low? Or is your circadian rhythm flipped? Do you wake up and your cortisol is way down here? You're exhausted all day, you go to bed and you can't because then your cortisol is high at nighttime when it's not supposed to be. So I'm looking at that. Your thyroid, looking at all the different things that be going on with the thyroid. And then what's happening with your testes if male and ovaries female. So looking at that triangle that needs to work together. If one of those is out of balance, it's going to pull the others out of balance. I call it a gateway root cause because a lot of us got here by being on the stress express. I'm not good enough. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to take care of everybody. I got to do all those things. And we pushed ourselves so hard we threw our adrenal gland, hypothalamic pituitary axis out early.
Yeah.
And that set us up. Yeah.
Right. Which is why I think we kind of started to talk about this a little bit too. I'm really big on when people are, especially like online, you'll hear a lot of people like advertising their services and they'll often
Yeah.
say like, I've got the answer. And as you
Yeah.
said earlier, it's like they probably really believe that too, because whatever they found that was the answer for them was the last missing piece.
Right.
The puzzle.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I was really sick in my second year of medical school. I had to take a whole year out. I had multiple miscarriages. The second one was 17 weeks hemorrhaged. I mean, it was just a whole big thing, um and as I got back to medical school a year later, like I was in bed with IVs in my arm, like sick, like people thought I was going to die, kind of sick. And then I got out of bed to the couch, was on the couch for a year. Then I was able to crawl back to medical school and kind of struggled, made it, but it was not easy. And then halfway through my residency, I totally figured out what I needed to do. But it was always felt like pieces of the puzzle to me that whole way through. And the last piece was like, bang, here I am. I'm back, like 150% back. Like could work these crazy long days and open clinics and had another kid and was not tired at all ever, and it was just amazing. And so that, but for me to go around and proselytize that last thing would be a mistake because I'd been working on it for all those 2 years, throwing everything I knew as a young naturopathic student and then doctor with all of these amazing professors around me. And then we were able to get, okay, now we're at this level and we can treat this thing. And then that was it.
I love that story. That's so, when did you have your last kid? How many years ago was that?
Oh, that was that. Well, I was a resident in 2000.
Okay.
And I remember walking down the hallway before I figured out that last piece, walking down the hallway with the doctor who was our dean. She was the dean of the residence. And she's like, I want to live to 125 and blah, 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 blah. And I just remember in my head, I was like early 30s. And I'm just like, why would you want to do that? Like, I already feel like I'm 92. And it is so much work just to get through the day and to walk my body down this hallway. I just can't, I literally could not identify with what she was saying. And then, I was in my 40s and 50s and going, I have so much more energy than I did when I was 30,
Yeah.
I don't now I feel like, even with I still have a little vestige of the long COVID I'm moving out, but even now, I just turned 60 and I feel like I mean, I don't identify with any age. I feel young inside. I feel wiser, which I love, but I feel young. I don't feel old at all.
I love that. So after you basically got better, what were the ebbs and flows like after?
Yeah.
Did you have bouts of something, but it wasn't as bad? Or was it just linear progression from here on out? What does that look like?
It's such a fair question. And I think it's such an important question to have because I do believe that 100% remission is possible for these conditions because I experienced it. And I say it was 150% better. And I was there was none of that energy budgeting, none of that fear. I literally was up in the morning, meditating, working out and doing all that stuff. So I did all that. I had a second kid. I had 9 years of secondary infertility. It was not overnight. So I was dealing with that stuff. But let's see, how many years was it? So that was 2000 when I got all the way well. And then it was, I was really well until about I'd say it started, if I'm honest, it was probably around 2012 that I started to not have as much energy, but I was in denial, if I'm honest. And I think that's true for all of us. It's like any kind of denial of slipping back into anything, any kind of habit or anything. I think it was a little bit in denial, but I did start noticing some stuff that where I was wanting to do a little bit less in certain situations. Mostly I was teaching at a teaching clinic, which meant that I had 12 students and we would have 4 rooms every hour and there would be 2 students in the rooms. And I was overseeing all the patients and all the students and I loved it. Like I loved being clinical faculty. It was so much fun. And I remember sort of towards the end when I was thinking about I did it for 7 years and I was thinking about putting in my notice. And part of it was like, I don't feel like this is work now. I don't have the same energy to be present in all these different places at the same time. Like my brain loved it, but and that was like the first sign looking back that the super high level functioning was a little bit more challenging for me. And then I had an injury, and that injury was I injured my knee playing soccer really badly. And I had to change my workouts. I was the most fit I'd ever been in my life and loved being strong, was lifting weights and felt amazing and was more athletic than I'd ever been. And I didn't want to lose any of that. And so I kept working out, woke up one morning with a crick in my shoulder and my neck. In my brain, I'm thinking, I'm 24, I'll keep working out. Went to the gym, did my swimming, did my upper body weights, did my core. And that pain just kept getting worse. This is also the time I was going through perimenopause, which we now know makes you way more vulnerable to all kinds of inflammation. This developed into frozen shoulder, had a very, very, very severe case of frozen shoulder. My knee continued to be really problematic because I was not as smart as I should have been. I did climb a mountain while my knee was injured and it made it much worse. Not recommended. And, I was like, I was dumb, but it was, and, they're just these things that I did. And, anyway, I would basically, the whole left side of my body was in severe pain. Because my hip and my shoulder were out, I couldn't do the yoga I usually did. So a chronic hip issue came back that I was completely gone. And so the left side of my body was in severe pain. This was so bad I could sleep 45 minutes at a time if I was lucky. It was like and so my sleep deprivation became severe. I had 7 pillows to sleep and I was trying to sleep and I'd sleep a little bit and I'd wake up in severe pain. So what it made me realize, like I was literally waking up in the night going, I don't know how I'm going to function. And I started seeing that big, huge gaping hole of chronic fatigue, bedridden chronic fatigue, like right there in front of me. It was terrifying. And what was terrifying was how quickly I relapsed. And it kind of made me realize this thing about chronic fatigue syndrome, that myalgic encephalitis, that I didn't realize was relapse was so easy to happen. Like once that's set up, you can go right back into it, which is now something I tell my patients and clients on day one, not as a way to scare you, but as a way of, as we're experimenting to see what works for your body, what are your root causes, what are your health foundations, what treatments resonate with your body, that goes in your toolkit. Because 5 years from now, you might be doing great and there might be a trauma that triggers a stress response in your body that your immune system isn't responding in the same way to those chronic viruses or whatever your root causes are. And you might have a flare. If you got that toolkit, if you remember, when I worked with Dr. Janie, this helped, you can pull that back out and use it and not slide down that slide. So I was sliding down that slide and I was in absolute fear because my family was 100% dependent on my income at that time. I had a clinic, I had overhead, I had employees, I had the kid, I had all the stuff, and it was all on me. And I was really scared. Like literally for me to go back to bed was bankruptcy, like literally, no joke. So I got up, I couldn't sleep. So I just got up and I started researching the heck. So because it was so many years later, there was a lot more information. At that time, it was still, everybody was looking for the one thing. Is it parvovirus? Is it EBV? Is it this? Is it that? And I was like, you know what? I don't think it is. And I thought everybody was going to leave my clinic practice at that time because I was in such a wreck. And because I'd always felt universally supported by my schedule. If my schedule, ever since I started seeing people, if my schedule would be full and then my schedule would empty out. I'm like, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh yeah, Jenny needs a little more self-care. So it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, thank you, universe, for taking care of me. You're right. I need to take care of myself. Thank you. And so I thought my schedule would empty out because I was a mess, but I still showed up at work. And the opposite happened. I actually got really packed, like insane. It was crazy. I was booked out like, 4 or 5 months with these crazy long waiting lists for people to come see me, and they all had chronic fatigue. And so I was able to kind of look at these things that I was studying, and I started to see these different patterns. And that's how I got to these 5 root causes. And it was in the process, I was literally working with patients who were not quite as sick as I was. They were getting better. I was gradually getting better as well as I was applying these different root causes to myself. And as I go through them, I'll kind of do it this way because we just started with the one root cause. I'll kind of talk about a little bit of my experience if I want to weave that in. I've never done that before, but if that's okay, so we can go through the
I
root
would love
causes.
that. Yeah.
And since you asked about my history, I kind of went into there. So,
Yes.
so that first root cause, adrenal fatigue, um, thyroid, ovary stuff. So I was in perimenopause. So my estrogen and progesterone were all out of whack. And that estrogen is a natural anti-inflammatory. And so that was not there, which made it a lot easier to get the frozen shoulder. And it also really significantly alters how your immune system functions. And the progesterone does all kinds of things. And one thing is it can really help us sleep. And this was in the era where all hormones were supposed to be really bad. Now, I never believed that as a naturopathic physician, but this is that era, like I'm at that generation where they had just yanked all these women off of HRT. I always felt like, small doses of bioidentical hormones would probably be okay. And so I went and saw some of my colleagues and we did micro dosing, like baby doses of estrogens and things like that. I was flatline cortisol, like literally had no cortisol in me at all. Flatline. You are so tired when you're flatline cortisol. So I did something that I've only had to do on a small handful of my patients, like literally a small handful. I took cortisone and I took a physiological dose, like 10 milligrams in the morning, under 20 milligrams of cortisone, not prednisone, cortisone. They're different. They're different strengths. So the normal amount my body would usually make, I took that and it was a lifesaver, like a lifesaver. That and the estrogen were incredible in terms of helping me. And I'm talking like you guys can relate who are listening to this. Like I'm talking about like if I had not been if it had not been all in me, I probably would have just like taken time off. If I'd had a corporate job and could have gotten leave, I would have taken leave. I was writing leave for people who were not as bad as I was. Like, so just like, this is like a woman who had to work
Yeah.
protocol.
No. And Dr. Jen,
And
I'm going to be so vulnerable here. My blood work came in recently and I'm literally in that right now. No cortisone, no pregnenolone, no anything. And I am like, just fighting I have care, right? I have care, so I'm not putting you in the doctor's seat. But it's just hearing you talk, and I'm postpartum too. Like my kids are 3 and 1, so I'm like, okay, this is It's just great to hear your story. I'm appreciating this.
Yeah. And I'm on like my heart goes out, like I really appreciate your vulnerability there because in what it feels like when you're in that state, that postpartum state, especially, if you've gone through pregnancy, you're breastfeeding, you're up at night. And then if you have any of these other, pieces going on, it's like you're drained. Like there's sort of this nothing under you holding you up kind of energy feeling, right?
And it's really interesting too, because, and this, maybe we can speak to this as part of one of those, it might come up in the root cause or the three-legged approach or however it comes up, but the day, not the day, but like the couple of weeks where I finally reached out to my own naturopath and my functional medicine nurse practitioner, they're like the two and mainly in charge of my care. And before I even started the supplements, and like I already started to feel better. Like there was already more energy. I'm still tired. But like it was just knowing that there was support and someone's got me. Like
totally.
I can't even explain to you. Like there's still a part of me that is like scared to say it out loud because I'm like, it might go away. Don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
At the same time, like I think the physiological care is so important, but there's something about the psychological component and the emotional social support.
Oh, there's a huge piece to that for this for sure. But I think people are told right and left that there's no answer for you. There's nothing you can do. Of course, it's mostly women. And so they don't get as much respect for talking about what they're feeling. just the way the system's set up, I mean, to just even explain your symptoms takes more than the 5 minutes the doctor has scheduled to see you, let alone get to, why is this showing up in you versus the next patient? And frankly, I think a lot of doctors are tired. And so they don't really know how to, they're not taught how to understand this. It's just not part of their training. And so there's lots of reasons. But you say, I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me and say, I I have hope again. Like, you were my last shot and now I have hope, or I do feel better just talking. And I think there is something to just being seen and feeling like there's somebody that's going to kind of help hold you in that space. For sure. It's very powerful.
And
So,
to be
yeah.
clear for the therapists that might be listening to this, because I'm a kind of I just think it's so important. There has to be the compassion and the validation and the being seen with a competence of we can try things. We do have a plan. We might not know exactly what's going to get you there, but there is a treatment plan that we can look at and try. And we have a level of confidence in that. I think that's the other important part. It can't just be, well, sometimes it can be, depending on how depleted you are from like that emotional validation or being seen, especially if there's some deep childhood stuff around that. But for me anyway, like knowing that somebody else gets it because they also have some answers is
Yes.
so critical.
Right, absolutely. That you're not at the end of the road here in terms of options. I mean, there's so many things you can do to address these conditions. It's crazy. I mean, it's just really funny. And what's the right match for you at this time, and for what we're addressing. So, okay, so that first root cause, yeah, which you're in right now, and it's so great you're addressing it because that's going to reduce your vulnerability to getting some of these other root causes. I mean, that's when they start to travel together. Is people may have 1, 2, 3, or all 5 of these root causes. And it just depends on where your body's at. But I call this the gateway because it's such a setup to being vulnerable to the other ones. And people may be in this first phase in their 20s and 30s for a long time, before some of the other stuff might hit them. So the second one is looking at infections. And these can be chronic reactivated viral infections, fungal infections, bacterial infections. They can be in your sinuses. They can be in your ear. They can be in your vagina. They can be in your mitochondria. They can be in your thyroid. They can be in your liver. They can be anywhere in your body. And so that's one of that can really pull on people's energy a lot. And the third one is looking at toxic overload. So this can be all the things that we're breathing in our air. We live in a more toxic planet right now. And I just think that that's just something we just have to accept as real and then take on the ownership of, okay, how do I support my body given this situation? What are my daily detox habits that I do? What's the tea I drink that helps me detoxify every day? Or what's the, just simple things you could do? We can talk about that more later if we have time. But these toxins, there are certain metals like mercury and lead that have this particular charge that can really impact how the energy system in our body works. There are things called glyphosates, which are in Roundup, which are in, in all of our foods, unfortunately, even in a lot of the organic, that really mess with how our body produces energy, and it can, impacts the gut and the microbiome, which is 80% of our immune system. And so really looking at these toxins is important. I would say that I assume everybody has some level of toxicity, and I'm not a fan of doing all the functional medicine tests in the world around toxicity, because I think you're always going to find a positive. I'm more interested in listening for certain things that give me an idea that maybe for you, this is one of the root causes that needs to be addressed sooner than later. Okay. One of the things with mycotoxins. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
What are you going to say?
I have a question about this. So like with toxic overload,
yeah.
Because I know that it's a bit tricky and a bit iffy on like who says what around the research. And I know I myself went down such a rabbit hole with like trying to get everything clean, everything. I mean, I only cleaned with vinegar. I eventually stopped doing that because my bathroom just wasn't getting clean. Like things like that. And so, but you mentioned something important. Like you are always going to find something with these tests because it is the world we live in. Like it just is. And so that tells me then that you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like there is a certain level that is okay for one person that might not be okay for another person. And it really is about, and again, so maybe we can talk a little bit about this, or at least just if we don't have time, then we can just plant the seed that I'm wondering about, like, it's sometimes your body will tell you, I don't like the smell of this, or And sometimes
Mm.
it's a sign that it's not good for you. And sometimes it's just our fear and it's not, and it really is okay for you. And so
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
find it hard to differentiate, but is there any thoughts? What thoughts do you have on that?
I do. I have a big thought on that. I'm going to save it because it's tied in with the fifth root cause.
Okay,
So I'm going to
great.
tie that particular thing. What I would say about the toxins in general, yeah, let me loop back to that in the fifth because when I talk about the fifth root cause.
Perfect.
And and I would say that in terms of toxins, mold and mycotoxins are a huge issue for a lot of people. And because it so dysregulates your immune system. And so if you are one of the people that's sensitive to mold or mycotoxins and you have that right now in your home, that's something that we need to pay attention to and do something about so that we can get things. That happened to me. So part of the reason I was tanking during that time when I had the perimenopause and the frozen shoulder is that we have this house that was built in 1905, and there was this really fun thing that I would watch with my kid every once in a while. I live in Portland, Oregon. Sometimes it would really rain, and there'd be a waterfall in our basement, and it was so fun. We would go watch it, and it would be a waterfall. All the water would come in the side door and go all the way down the carpeted stairs, and then would circle around and go down to our laundry room drain. And it was like, nah, okay, that's just happened. And but sure enough, underneath those stairs, all black mold. Another place where there had been a leak, all this mold underneath this carpeting in our basement. And we had been living in that for a long time. Found out that also my clinic basement had had a leak and there was mold in my basement. And then we found there was mold in my car. And so I had all of these things. Now, when I had somebody, so anyway, we ended up doing just this massive remodel. And then we moved out for a year, and that was huge for me to get that taken care of. Now, I really have to tell all of you who are listening to this, I was able to still improve my health while I stayed in the moldy house because it took us about a year to get the plans together, the engineers to say okay, to get the funding to do all the things because we did a massive remodel in our house. And we decided to remodel instead of move. That was also on the table. And we decided to just do the thorough remodel. And so, but I was able to still improve, but I could still kind of within my box. Like I wasn't able to have the breakthrough experience that I wanted to have. I was still holding on to that. Like I was 150% better before. I want 150% better now. Like I don't accept this ceiling stuff. I don't like it. So
Thank you for saying that. I think that's
yeah,
so important.
yeah.
As we,
So,
as we talk
so
about this stuff, the fear that people have.
yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah. So I figured all this stuff out about my house and we're figuring this out. I was still working in the clinic, seeing these patients that I was talking about, figuring all these root causes out in that clinic. And the mold was all in the basement anyway. So the other root cause is looking at mitochondrial function. Now, the mitochondria are the powerhouses in all of your cells. And this is something where people who have post-exertional malaise, where you do a little bit more one day and then you are just flat out exhausted. So for you, it might be doing the dishes and the laundry. For somebody else, I can do a 3-mile walk, but if I go 5, I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow. And that's post-exertional malaise. And that's a definite sign that your mitochondria are not functioning well. And so we know there's something going on there. For most people, not all people with long COVID have some kind of mitochondrial dysfunction. I'd say most of them do and have some kind of post-exertional malaise. Um, this is one of those things where we can do a trial of this, what I call mitofoods, and see how it improves. This is one of those things. I ordered a book from Dr. Sarah Myhill in Britain, and I waited for weeks for this book. This is me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, PubMed, reading everything, following little trails, all the stuff you've done it. You're smiling. You know what I'm talking about. And then I found this Sarah Myhill book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can't buy it in the United States. Have to ship it from Britain. Have to wait weeks for this book to come. The book comes, and I read it 3 times, and she talks about the mitochondria, and she talks about these different things you can take for it. And so I put together my own little protocol and did a trial. Now, Dr. Datis Karazian, who is an amazing, brilliant teacher, highly recommend you for all of you doctors out there to listen to him. He's incredible. And he was coming to town and teaching a 3-day seminar that I really, really wanted to go to. But there was no way I had the energy to go. Like, even if I took my nap kit, which was how I survived by taking naps every day, and I drove with my nap kit in the car, I always had a pillow and a blanket in the car. I could always pull over and sleep. even if I took my nap kit and I was in the back of the hotel room lying down on the floor, which I thought about doing, I'm like, I still don't, I still can't. I'm like, I don't have the energy even to do that. Like, I just can't show up every day for this workshop. So super sad I couldn't go. Found out my cousins were going to come to town that same weekend. And um, all the stuff had just arrived from my mitochondria. So I started taking it about 2 days before they arrived. On Saturday, they wanted to go up to Mount Hood and go for a hike. And I was like, I'm feeling a bit better. I'll just go up with you. I'm going to sit in the car and I'm going to sit outside and do my artwork and just hang out while you guys hike. And I'll see you back, but it'll be nice for me to get out of the house. So I go up there and I'm like, I still feel, I don't know, I feel like I kind of want to hike a bit. So I'm just going to go for a walk with you guys a little bit. I'm going to walk a bit. I'll come around when I'm ready. Ended up doing a 3-mile hike and got back to the car, and we started really late, and like they were really late showing up. So it was like late. And so we ended up getting back from the hike, and it was dinner time. We waited for food at the little resort there. Took them forever to get food. We ended up getting home at midnight. I mean, ended up being just like the worst day for anybody with chronic fatigue myalgic encephalitis, right? And it was long. I hiked, but I was taking all this stuff that I was taking from my mitochondria, and I was just like, I was driving home and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be like in bed for 10 days for this. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I woke up the next morning and I was fine. And I never had a crash from it. And it was all because of this mitochondrial stuff that I was doing. And my mitochondria were responding to this treatment. Now, I'm happy to share what this is, but this treatment is one of the things that I'll give to some patients if I feel like their mitochondria are messed up from what they're telling me as a trial, because you're going to know in 5 days if it works or not. If it does, great. We now have a platform, a bridge. You have more energy that you can now eat better, look at some of the other root causes, have the energy to keep healing your body. And that's helpful. Now, for the people that it doesn't work for, that's also a clue to me, because that lets me know there's something going on. Either I was wrong and it's not the mitochondria, or there's something that's disallowing their body to get that nutrients into their mitochondria. And that number one thing that I found time in and time out are heavy metals. And so because the lead, the mercury, those metals tend to block the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And that's one of the main things. So that's when I'll choose to do like a heavy metal urine test and see if that helps them, if it flares up, and then we'll do a heavy metal detox. And then often their body responds better to the mitochondrial treatments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So I'm kind of I'm thinking about which are the root causes, and I'm kind of ruling in, ruling out. And sometimes it's by trial, by treatment, like I did for myself. And I'd say, that works out of 10 patients, it probably for like 4 out of 10, it's like an absolute gift, like, oh my gosh. The other 6, it's like, I can't tell, or no, it didn't work. It's like, okay, great. That's great. Thank you for the information. Thanks for trying it. Let's do the next thing.
What I love about this approach is that when something doesn't work, it gives you more data. Whereas,
exactly,
unfortunately, in Western medicine, it is a lot of like totally life-saving. I'm all for it. Lots of it. But oftentimes it is like, oh, the surgery didn't work. Oh, like this pain is now anxiety induced. It's in your head. And like, I just, yeah.
Yeah. It's so different, because I always again, I know the body knows how to heal. I know the body can do that. I know there's something blocking your body's ability to be normal. And what is that thing? We have to keep finding it. And so I think this is important. I know this is how I work as a practitioner, and I think it's great when practitioners do work this way, and there are a lot who do. And I also think it's really great for those of you who are struggling with this condition, myself included. There are times when it's just like, oh my God, I just feel like I'm trying all this stuff and how come it's not working? You got to keep going. Like you really do. You've got to just keep going, because there's going to be something that will work for your body. You just haven't found it yet. You just have to keep hang in there. So that's that's the supportive speech. So let's see, where was I? So the other root cause, the 5th root cause is, we've got the hormone triangle, we've got the infections, we've got the toxins, we've got the mitochondrial dysfunction, and they overlay. I know that. And the last is looking at that emotional limbic brain. right? Which is what you're alluding to with the stress piece, right? And so we know so much more now. I mean, back then when I uncovered this, everybody was like, what are you talking about? Like, it was really in the beginning of people talking about this stuff, about how the brain has all this neuroplasticity and there are things that we create. And um, it made a lot of sense to me because I was early on aware of the power of the subconscious mind and was an early advocate for subconscious healing and the power of doing therapies, whether somatic therapy like you do, or different things of getting to those things that happened before we even verbal. Like, how can we talk about something that happened before we even verbal or that we inherited, right? How can we talk about that? That's in the subconscious mind. So a lot of us who have these complex chronic fatigue and complex conditions, I think, have stuff that's going on that mental, emotional, or energetic level of the body. We have the physical, mental, emotional, and energy, and it's happening on that level. And this limbic brain is really one of the places where a lot of that gets connected. The limbic brain is the emotional brain in the subconscious mind. They're finding the amygdala and insula is a really huge part of this as well. And it connects to the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body that connects to all the organs. And there's information going up and down all the time here, letting us know, are we safe or are we not safe? Are we safe or are we not safe? If you had childhood experiences that made you feel less safe, you are biased to seeing things as less safe. You had genetic trauma, you're biased to seeing things as less safe. It probably got you here, probably got your ancestors to survive. And it's why you're here. And now we need to learn to communicate and experience things in a different way. But if that ties in with also having dysbiosis, gut inflammation, or these chronic viruses or these toxins, it starts sending information up to the limbic brain, confirming this, we're not okay, we're not okay, we're not okay. You end up in a vicious cycle where your whole immune system, hormonal system, everything can be thrown off. And out of a desire to save you, that limbic brain amplifies the experience and basically says, I don't know what's going on there. It's not safe. I want you to stay well. So please, I'm going to amplify your fatigue and your pain. So you go hide. I want you to go into your bed. I want you to go in behind the rock. I want you to hide because it's not safe out there. And that's kind of what's happening in some of these situations. Chemical sensitivity. Chemical sensitivity is a sign of limbic brain dysfunction.
Yeah, it's such a it is such a hard one. Okay, so I'm always very anti DNRS of anybody, because of how harsh the program is, and and it was thrown at me by a somatic therapist who basically wasn't able to help me, and then she's like, I don't know, I've heard of DNRS, you should try that. And so automatically it wasn't going to work for me because it was thrown at me. But I guess it feels contradictory of toxic overload and then chemical sensitivity being in your brain. So is it toxic or is it not? But I know it's not black and white like that. So maybe you can give a more nuance.
They're separated out. And let me just talk about so in terms of toxins in our body, when you talk about an element coming into your body that's not natural to our body, it's impacting everybody. Plastics are hormone disruptors. They're affecting all of us. We all have plastic in our brain now, like everybody does. And that's not good. That's a problem. But you have a garbage can. I can grab my garbage can. You have plastic you have plastic that's here, and then you add this and it's here, but you start adding up and it overflows. For one person, plastic, it's not that big of a deal. For somebody else, it's causes this huge problem, right? So there's that piece. When you also talk about elements of toxins in the body from the physical level, not just on the physical level, how good is your body at moving stuff out? Some of us are genetically better at detoxifying than others, just what our blueprint is of what we're born into. And then you can add on, if you also have a lifestyle where you're not supporting your detox pathways day in and day out, then you're more likely to get things to back up. And then you add on to that some other things, and then that becomes more of a problem. Again, these toxins become more of a problem for you if you don't detoxify regularly or you have a bad lifestyle for you where it adds on. So that's and there are some toxins that are worse than others. There's some mycotoxins that are worse than other mycotoxins. There's some other elements that are worse than others, and dosage is huge in all of this stuff. So there's a lot just from a biochemical level that's going on in the body around this. And I think, I don't want to overcomplicate, and I don't want to simplify it, but that's kind of there. Now, those of us, I've been like all through medical schools, chemically sensitive. In clinic, I'd be like, yep, I'm with you. This back in the 90s. I'm with you. We are canaries in the coal mine. Like this woman, I had this patient who she was in a wheelchair. And if she was outside and somebody was using Tide or Bounce in their dryer and she got a waft of it, she was back in bed for 2 weeks with a severe flare of her fibromyalgia. And I'm just like, I would get so mad at people for like using this stuff. I'm like, you're making my people sick, Like for me, it just annoyed me, but it's like, you're making my people sick. This is not good for you. Stop doing this. And I felt really upset about it. But I knew it was a canary in the coal mine because I was just a sensitive human being and I could tell it was a poison and nobody else could. And it made me mad. So I was kind of,
Yeah. That was how I mean, I never got as bad as it giving me a full-on flare-up. It was more like it annoyed me. Maybe I'd get a headache, but not a full-on migraine. And so I always was a little bit confused because I would hear some people being that extreme and then other people like my husband who didn't even notice it. Like he can't even smell it by asking if it's there.
What smell? Right. Yeah. Okay. So the fifth root cause, looking at that limbic brain, that amygdala insula. So I heard about the limbic retraining and I heard about the couple different programs out there. I actually I bought Annie Hopper's DNRS training and got the DVDs. And I was like, it was sort of, there's like, this isn't going to work for me this way. And I won't go into time as to why. And I thought the only way that this is going to work for me. And at this point in my health, I was much better. I remember walking up the hill behind our house with a friend and she's also a doctor, and explaining to her and kind of going, I'm so much better. So many people with this condition would be so happy to be as well as I am. I can function now. I need a nap every day, but I function otherwise beautifully. And but I know there's further for me to go. And I said, I can feel that I have to go further so I can lead more people is basically what I told her. I really feel that. And for a whole year, I knew about the limbic retraining and hadn't done it because I felt like I knew so much about the subconscious mind. I treated so many people on the subconscious level in my clinic that surely I could do this myself. I should be able to figure this out by myself, which if that resonates with you, this is part of the condition, is this sense of I should be able to do this on my own. I should get figured out. And you kind of feel bad that you're not better, right? And especially as a practitioner, I think that's there, but I think it's there for all of us because we're all smart people. And we feel like we've invested so much, we've done so much, I should be there. So that's kind of a thing. Anyway, so I was, and I remember saying, I know what I need to do. And I needed to go invest this, what felt like a huge amount of money at the time to me to go away for a week and to go do this treatment. Now, I'm going to tell you, my mindset when before I went to go do Annie's retreat for a week up in Canada was I looked at the picture of the hotel room and I thought, well, if nothing else, I'll have a nice week in that hotel room. And I took a stack of books and I took my art projects because I was basically like, if I don't like it, I'm just going to sit in the hotel room for 5 days and hang out. That's my attitude.
I'm hearing a lot of mental flexibility also as you're going throughout this. And I think that's a critical piece in everything that we're talking about.
Interesting. Thank you for reflecting that. I appreciate that. So I went and then the first day I'm in the elevator with somebody who's just having an absolute anxiety panic attack and has her scarf like this as we're going down the elevator. She's like, I thought it was going to be not chemical in here and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I into for a week? And I also felt, I honestly felt kind of like a failure that I had to go there. Like I felt like I'd been bad. Like I felt like I was the bad student. I had to go to bad student camp, and get fixed. And I was like so funny. Like my attitude was just. So we get in there and the first day they're just like, well, you're going to be here. We start at 8 a.m. You're going to be here all day. And I'm like, no breaks. And like, well, we break for lunch. I'm like, what about my nap? Like, I can't function. Like, you don't understand. I turn into a pumpkin. Like, I'm great until 1 and then I have to sleep for 2 hours. I don't function. Like my whole life for the last year has been on the schedule. Like I don't, and they're like, yeah, nope, you just have to be here. But we're sort of but they taught us enough concepts that I would start to practice some of the stuff during that time when my body's like, oh, I want to sleep. I started doing some things. And it was really interesting. I had it really did have, it was really helpful for me. And it really helped me. And it helped me understand the power of that limbic brain in a different way. And it's different than some of the other subconscious stuff that we're working on. It's a different thing. It really is a habit of the brain that's there for survival. And I don't think that this program is right for everybody all the time. And yet I say this as a fifth root cause because I do see a lot of people get stuck in this place like I was, where I had done all the other things. And this time, that was the last piece of the puzzle for me, was that. And I was able within, like, I came home, I didn't need naps anymore. My husband's like, he didn't say anything, but like after 2 weeks, I think I'm better. And he's like, yeah, I can tell. He's like, you don't have to nap anymore. I'm like, yeah, it's great, huh? And as I started to do things, but the thing was so hilarious was going into bathrooms and getting the soap and going like, God, it smells kind of like the perfume grandma gave me when I was 8 years old. That's kind of sweet. And I'm like going, wait a second, what just happened? Like my
Yeah.
sense of smell has actually shifted, literally has shifted. And I'd be in the airport and my husband was like, oh my God, that perfume, are you okay? I'm like, what perfume? What are you talking about? I don't even smell it. And now that's a
And was
sign
this
for me.
was this you the week-long trip? It was Annie Hopper's DNRS, but it was in person? Is that right? Okay.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it was in person. And and I did the exercises and I did all the stuff and I was still, but I'm still doing all the other things too, right? I'm still doing all the things. And the sense of smell has been a nice kind of thing for me. I can tell when my limbic brain's a little bit in dysfunctional state because of how sensitive I am to smell. And
That's
that's one of the
exactly
pieces.
how it
And
is.
that's one of the pieces there. I would say to your point of having it ramrodded down your throat or being because this person couldn't figure it out, they told you to do this. I see this as a real problem in my field too. I've had a lot of people I feel like people, because they don't understand what this limbic retraining really is. And there are different people who different kinds of limbic retraining, have different styles and approaches. Annie's is very NLP based, so it's very great for those left brain analytical types. Um, Ashok Gupta, who I've become friends with, he's a lot more in the somatic based, looking more in the somatic. So that works, meditative process, that works a lot better for a lot of other people. It's more gentle. But they both get there in the same place. And honestly, you can get there in other ways too. It's like we understand now more what the physiology is and what that is. But I put that as a fifth root cause for people to understand the power of our emotional body and how this is and it doesn't mean that it's a mood thing. It doesn't mean you made it up. It means that it's physiologic. It's literally physiology trying to protect you, trying to save you. It's a dysregulated system. And there are ways of re-regulating it. And you can find the tools and that way to access that in for yourself, with the help of somebody else so that you can find that switch. It could be doing somatic therapy for you. And so I just think that the power of our mind is so strong. And sometimes we believe our minds when we shouldn't. And
Yeah.
to
To
this
the
day, to this day, I wake up, I have things that will happen in my body and I'll wake up in that kind of early thing and I'll feel anxiety or or I feel worried about something or whatever. And I have this deal where I'm like, okay, do a check. Anything I need to pay attention to? Okay, no. Okay, well then let's see if we can find some love, And I have a breathing meditation I do while I'm in bed before I get up in the morning because I'm like, I'd rather be through my day in love than I would sit in fear.
I love
And
that.
unless there's something I really need to attack, with my fear brain, I'd rather be there. So I consciously still to this day practice being how I want to be when I can, and I catch myself when I'm not there and I bring myself back. And I just think it's part of having a brain.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. It is. So I'm glad you gave more context for the DNRS kind of approach. And I know there is the Gupta program and then Primal Trust, which I think is
Yeah.
even like softer than Gupta. So it almost feels like it's DNRS, Gupta, and then Primal Trust with with a scale of like harsh to like rigid to fluid.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just depends because I have some patients who just, some people who they like the clarity of the DNRS, like that works for
Right.
them. And then I'll also say there are times when it's just not the right thing. I mean, I think if you're a lot of therapists are listening, you understand that. So for instance, my dad died and it was a beautiful death. I midwifed his death. It was beautiful, incredible passing. And I was really sad and for, grieving heavily for, 1 or 2 years after that, as you should. And um, it was, or as I did, I know there's no shoulds in grief.
Right. No should, but you're basically
There's no
saying,
shoulds, but I was grieving. And so doing the DNRS just felt so like there's no way. And also a lot of my happy memories were with him and it would totally trigger my grief. And so
right.
I couldn't, like, it was like this thing and I was like, it's like, oh, this system isn't like the way she built that. I couldn't figure out how to make it work for when I was grieving. Now I could have probably hired a coach to have them help me or whatever. And I didn't do that. So I just want to say that out of fairness. But I just think that there's a time and a place for different things. And I also think that I've done a lot of stuff with Joe Dispenza, and I've done some deeper subconscious work in other ways. And I actually felt like the DNR is super helpful for me, life-saving, as it is for many of my patients. Or the Gupta program or any of these other programs. And there is also a level of that where it's kind of you're repainting the room to make it so that you can be there. And there may be another window or time in your life when you actually want to go down under the foundation. And that's what I felt like I've been doing in my own personal journey since I got COVID. It was an invitation for me to be like, okay, I know I need to do this work. I'm going to try on this other thing and do this other work and see what happens. And like you said, I can now look back and go, oh, this makes sense because all of this journey that, I could say would have been nicer to not have has allowed me to open up to a whole other level place in my being.
I love this. This has been so incredibly helpful. Anything else that you wanted to say that we didn't get to yet?
No, I feel like I said a lot.
Amazing. This is so good and clear. And maybe
that's great. Yeah, I will say one thing at the end, just here, like the one thing I would say is to just maintain that hope. It's like, I know you have days where you're really down and you feel like you just, banging your head against the wall and it's not going anywhere. And I honor that moment in you, but it's like, what do you do after you have that cry or after you feel down and disappointed? When you get up from that, that's the important point, is like making that choice to still have hope. Like, what's the next thing? Because I know that if you keep trying, if you keep knocking on doors, there's going to be one that opens up and allows you to get to that next level of health, where then you get to go, oh, now I get it. I feel better. And it's just going to make a world of difference. So hang in there and keep going.
Oh, thank you so much. Will you please tell us about your summit that you have coming up?
Oh, yes, I will. Yes. So I am doing an incredible summit. We're going for longest summit title competition. I think we're going to win. And I can't even remember the whole title right now, but it's long COVID, fatigue, brain fog, pain, all that stuff. And how you can, we're really literally, because I'm hosting this myself, I'm bringing in all the aspects I see. It's the physical, the mental, emotional, and energetic. I'm interviewing these incredible researchers that I've been reading their papers for decades. I'm also, they're healers, and there's all sorts of information there. So if you're struggling with these conditions, highly recommend you check it out. I know there's going to be something amazing in there for you. It's April 11th through 18th, and it's absolutely free for you to come in and sign up for that. And then, of course, like all the summits, you have the option to purchase it during the summit for a pretty low amount of money for most people to be able to get those recordings to just go back to all the time. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm thrilled about putting this out there to get the information out. So if you know people who need this information, I highly recommend you share it with them, because there's really going to be a lot in there for everyone.
Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need. And lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do if you found this episode helpful. And P.S., clicking subscribe ensures you'll be here for the next episode. See you then.